I watched my father's knuckles go white around his steak knife as he leaned across my dining table like a judge passing sentence. My sister smirked, sipping my wine like she already owned the place. Then Dad barked the order I had heard my whole life to take care of her, when I refused. He threatened my career, so I smiled. They thought they were trapping me, but they did not know I had already built the exit. My name is Stella Davis. I am 34 years old, and until that Tuesday night in Columbus, Ohio, I had spent every single one of those years apologizing for taking up space. I was the reliable one, the quiet one, the one who kept the books balanced and the secrets buried. But as I sat at the head of my own dining table, watching the two people who were supposed to love me the most dismantle my life between bites of medium-rare filet mignon, I realized that being reliable is just a polite way of saying you are easy to use. The air in my dining room was so thick with tension you could practically taste the copper tang of it, sharp and metallic against the rich smell of the roast beef I had spent 3 hours preparing. My father, Howard Davis, was midway through a performance I had seen 1,000 times before. He was not just angry, he was theatrical. He leaned forward, his elbows digging into the mahogany table I had bought with my own bonus check 2 years ago. His face was a map of indignation, flushed a deep, alarming red that usually preceded a lecture on loyalty. He slammed his hand down. The silverware rattled. The crystal wine glass near his right hand trembled but did not fall. "You are being selfish, Stella," he boomed. It was not a conversation. It was a verdict. "Your sister is going through the worst crisis of her life. She is practically destitute. She is heartbroken. And you are sitting here worried about your guest room linens? Family helps family. That is the rule. That has always been the rule." I looked at my sister. Marianne. If Marianne was destitute or heartbroken, she certainly had a strange way of showing it. She was sitting to my left, lounging in my chair with a posture that suggested she had already claimed squatters' rights. She was 37 years old, 3 years my senior, but she still carried herself with the reckless, protected arrogance of a teenager who knows daddy will pay the speeding ticket. She was sipping a glass of my Pinot Noir, a bottle that cost $60, which I had been saving for a promotion celebration, and looking around the room with a critical, bored expression. She caught my eye and smirked. It was a small, tight expression, a needle smile. It said, "I am here now, and there is nothing you can do about it." "I am not saying I won't help," I said, my voice steady. That was the first crack in their script. Usually, by this point, I would be stammering. I would be offering compromises. I would be shrinking. "I am saying she cannot live here indefinitely. Dad, I work from home 3 days a week. I have a routine. Marianne has made it clear she hates my rules. Why force us into the same house? You have 4 empty bedrooms in the main house in Bexley. She would be more comfortable there." Marianne groaned, rolling her eyes toward the ceiling as if I had just asked her to sleep in a dumpster. "Dad's house is under renovations. Stella, we went over this. The contractors are there from 7 in the morning until 5 at night. I need peace. I need to heal. My nervous system is shot." "She needs stability," Howard interjected, pointing his steak knife at me. "She needs her sister." God. Stella, when did you become so cold? Your sister's marriage just imploded. Her husband left her with nothing. He left her with a settlement pending, I corrected. And she is not destitute. She is wearing a pair of earrings that cost more than my mortgage payment. Howard's eyes narrowed. He hated facts when they contradicted his narrative. He dropped the knife onto his plate with a clatter that echoed off the walls. The performance shifted gears. The grieving father act vanished, replaced by the corporate shark. This was the Howard Davis who ran Hawthorne and Rowe Interiors. The man who negotiated contracts by finding the other party's weak point and pressing until something snapped. "Let's stop playing games," he said. His voice dropped an octave. It was quieter now, which meant it was more dangerous. "This isn't a request. Stella, you have plenty of room here. You have a guest suite you never use because you never have friends over. Marianne is moving in tomorrow. You will give her the master suite because she needs the bathtub for her therapy soaks. You will take the guest room. You will cover her groceries and her bills until the settlement comes through, whenever that is, and you will do it with a smile on your face. I felt a coldness spread through my chest. It wasn't fear. It was clarity. It was the sensation of a fever breaking. No, I said. The word hung in the air, heavy and absolute. Marianne stopped mid-sip. She lowered the wine glass, blinking. She had never heard me say that word to him. Not once. Not when he forced me to major in business instead of literature. Not when he made me hire his incompetent nephew as my assistant. Not when he canceled my vacation to handle a crisis Marianne had caused at the company Christmas party. "Excuse me?" Howard whispered. "No," I repeated. I picked up my napkin and folded it neatly on my lap. I will not give up my bedroom. I will not bankroll her life. And she is not moving in without a signed agreement on a move-out date. This is my house. My name is on the deed. My money pays the mortgage. Howard stared at me for a long time. Then, he leaned back in his chair and let out a short, sharp laugh. It was a dry sound, devoid of humor. "Your house," he mocked. "Your money." He looked at Marianne, shaking his head in mock disbelief, then turned his gaze back to me. The shark was circling. "Let me remind you of something. Stella, who gave you the down payment for this house?" "I paid you back," I said. "With interest. 5 years ago." "Who gave you your job?" he countered. "Who made you vice president of operations at Hawthorne and Rowe? Who makes sure you take home a 6-figure salary that allows you to buy $60 bottles of wine and talk back to your father?" My stomach tightened. I knew we would get here eventually. The family business, the golden handcuffs. "I earned that position," I said, though my voice sounded thinner to my own ears. "I run the entire logistics division. I saved the company 12% on shipping costs last quarter alone." "You are there because I allow you to be there," Howard hissed. "You are an employee at will. Stella, at my will. Do you think anyone else in Columbus is going to hire you at your current rate? Do you think you are indispensable?" He leaned in again. The threat no longer veiled. It was naked. It was ugly. "Here is the deal. You take care of your sister. You give her whatever she needs for as long as she needs it, or you don't have a job on Monday morning. I will fire you for cause. I will tell every contact I have in this industry that you were stealing from the company. I will burn your reputation to the ground so thoroughly that you won't be able to get hired as a barista, let alone an executive. You will lose this house within 6 months." He picked up his wine glass and took a long, satisfied swallow. "So," he said, setting the glass down, "are we done being selfish? Is Marianne moving in?" Marianne let out a soft, breathy laugh. She traced the rim of her glass with a manicured fingernail, looking at me with pity. She leaned over, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, loud enough for Dad to hear, but intimate enough to sting. "Oh, Dad, don't be so harsh," she said, though her eyes were dancing with malice. "She's just tired. Stella always folds. You know that. She always does exactly what she is told." She looked at me, tilting her head. "Don't you, Stell? You're the good girl." I looked at them. I looked at my father, a man who defined fatherhood as ownership. I looked at my sister, a woman who defined sisterhood as parasitism. They saw me sitting there, quiet and pale, and they saw a victim. They saw the Stella who had spent 34 years desperate for a scrap of approval. They thought they had boxed me in. They thought the threat of unemployment, the fear of losing my status, would force me to my knees. But they had missed something. They didn't know that I had been keeping receipts for 10 years. They didn't know about the side accounts. They didn't know that I knew exactly where the bodies were buried in the Hawthorne and Rowe ledgers, because I was the one who had been forced to dig the graves. A strange calm settled over me. It was the calm of a soldier who has just realized they have nothing left to lose, and therefore everything to gain. The shaking in my hands stopped. The tightness in my chest unspooled. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't beg them to be reasonable. I simply looked Howard Davis in the eye. "You think that is a threat," I said softly, "but you have forgotten who actually runs your company. Dad, you shake the hands and drink the scotch. I run the systems. I know the passwords. I know the vendors. I know why the audit committee didn't look too closely at the Q3 reports 2 years ago." Howard's face went from red to a patchy, mottled purple. "How dare you?" "By the end of this week," I said, my voice level, conversational, as if discussing the weather. "You won't be able to order anything in my life. You won't tell me where to sleep. You won't tell me how to spend my money. And you certainly won't tell me who lives in my house," Howard scoffed, slamming his hand on the table again. But this time, the gesture lacked power. It was desperate. "You are bluffing. You are a little girl playing poker with the big boys. You abandon your sister, and I will destroy you. I will ruin you. Stella, I promise you that." I stood up. The motion was slow, deliberate. I pushed my chair back. The legs scraped against the hardwood floor. A harsh sound in the silent room. I placed my napkin on the table, right next to the plate of cooling beef. I looked down at them. Marianne looked unsure now, her smirk faltering. Howard looked furious, veins bulging in his neck. "You have spent my entire life teaching me that everything is a transaction," I said. "You taught me that love is conditional and that loyalty is just a debt to be paid. You wanted a business partner, not a daughter. Well, congratulations. Howard, you finally got one." I walked toward the archway that led to the living room, pausing just long enough to look back over my shoulder. "You're about to learn the difference between blood and leverage," I said. I walked out of the dining room, leaving them frozen in the amber light of the chandelier. I didn't look back. I didn't stop to clear the table. I walked straight to the front door, grabbed my keys, and stepped out into the cool Ohio night air. The door clicked shut behind me, sealing the noise and the toxicity inside. I stood on my porch for a moment, listening to the silence of the suburbs. It was peaceful. It was deceptive. Inside, they were likely already plotting, convincing themselves that I would come back in 5 minutes, apologizing, ready to surrender. They thought this was a tantrum. They thought I was reacting to the heat of the moment. They were wrong. This wasn't a tantrum. It was a demolition order. I walked to my car, unlocked the door, and sat in the driver's seat. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of leather and potential. I pulled my phone out of my purse and looked at the date. Tuesday. I had 3 days until the end of the week. 3 days to execute a plan I had been building in the back of my mind for years. A safety hatch I had constructed for a fire I hoped would never start, but the match had been struck. The house was already burning. They just didn't smell the smoke yet. I started the engine. Here is how my house became their battleground. To understand why I walked out of that dinner, you have to rewind the clock. You have to go back 3 months to the moment the peace in my life was shattered by a ringtone I had specifically assigned to the people I dreaded hearing from the most. It was a Tuesday, just past midnight. The house was silent, that heavy, comforting silence of a well-insulated suburban townhouse where only one person lives. I was asleep, deep in a dream about spreadsheets that balanced perfectly on the first try. When my phone vibrated against the nightstand wood, I fumbled for it, squinting against the harsh blue light. The name on the screen made my stomach turn over. Marianne. My sister never called at midnight to ask how I was doing. She never called to share good news. Midnight calls were for emergencies, and in the Davis family, emergencies were a currency used to buy attention. I answered, voice thick with sleep. "Hello?" "He left," Marianne wailed. There was no preamble, just a wet, ragged sob that sounded like it was being amplified for dramatic effect. "He packed a bag and left. Stella, it is over." I sat up, rubbing my eyes. Marianne and her husband, a venture capitalist with a wandering eye and a charming smile, had been on the rocks for years. This was not a surprise, but I knew my role. I was supposed to gasp. I was supposed to be the audience. "I am so sorry," Marianne, I said, trying to infuse my voice with the requisite amount of shock. Do you want me to come over tomorrow? Tomorrow? She screeched. Stella, I am alone in this house. The memories are suffocating me. I cannot stay here. I cannot be in this bed. A cold knot of dread tightened in my gut. I knew where this was going before she even said the words. I swung my legs out of bed, my feet hitting the cold hardwood floor. Dad said I should call you, she continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial weep. He said you would know what to do. He said you have plenty of room. There it was, the pincer move. Howard Davis had already set the trap, and Marianne was just the one springing it. Marianne, I started, keeping my voice calm. You can't come here tonight. It is past midnight. I have a presentation at 8 in the morning. Why don't you go to a hotel? I will pay for it. The Ritz downtown. You can get room service and a spa treatment in the morning. A hotel? She spat the word like it was a slur. I just lost my husband, and you want to put me in a hotel like a transient? I need family. Stella, I need my sister. Then go to Dad's house, I countered. He has the staff. He has the space. You love his house. I can't, she sniffled. Dad is doing renovations. The whole east wing is stripped down to the studs. There is dust everywhere. My asthma creates issues. You know that. Besides, Dad said his place is too chaotic for healing. He said your house is quiet. Quiet. That was the word they used to describe my life. To them, quiet meant empty. To me, quiet meant safe. My home was my sanctuary. It was the one place in the world where I didn't have to manage anyone's expectations, where I didn't have to fix anyone's mistakes. Every throw pillow, every book on the shelf, every coaster was exactly where I wanted it to be. I don't think it is a good idea, I said, knowing even as I spoke that I was losing ground. You are so selfish, Marianne whispered. The accusation hissed through the speaker. I am in the worst pain of my life, and you are worried about your precious routine. Fine, I will just sleep in my car. She was not going to sleep in her car. She was driving a Range Rover that cost more than my college tuition, but the guilt trip was a Davis family heirloom, passed down from father to daughter, and I had been trained to buckle under its weight since I was 5 years old. Fine, I breathed out, regretting it instantly. Fine, but just for a little while. 2 weeks. Marianne, that is the limit. I have a major project launching next month, and I need the house to work. Thank you, she sobbed, the tears instantly drying up in her voice. I knew you were the good one. I will be there in 20 minutes. She hung up before I could retract the offer. I stared at the phone, feeling the walls of my sanctuary closing in. I knew my sister. Give her an inch, and she would take a mile. Give her a guest room, and she would annex the house. I needed to establish boundaries immediately. I needed it in writing. I opened my messaging app and typed out a text. I wanted there to be no ambiguity. Marianne, the door is unlocked. Before you get here, we need to agree on ground rules so this works for both of us for the next 2 weeks. 1. Quiet hours are from 10 at night until 7 in the morning. I work from home and have early meetings. 2. No guests. I am not running a bed and breakfast. 3. No smoking inside, not even vaping. I will charge you a cleaning fee if I smell it. 4. No redecorating. Leave my furniture where it is. 5. We share chores. I am not your maid. Please reply with a thumbs up so I know you understand. I hit send. 3 minutes later, a reply popped up. It was 3 red heart emojis followed by a single sentence. You will understand when you have been betrayed. She hadn't agreed to a single rule. She had just weaponized her victimhood to bypass them. The next morning, the sun rose over a house that felt different. The air felt heavier. I had barely slept. I was in the kitchen making coffee when my phone rang again. It was Dad. I heard you stepped up, Howard said. No hello. No, how are you? Just the assessment of my utility. That is my girl. I knew you would do the right thing. She can only stay for 2 weeks. Dad, I said, pouring the hot water over the grounds. "I am serious. I have the quarterly audit coming up." Of course, he said, his voice breezy and dismissive. "Just let her get back on her feet. She is fragile right now. Stella, you are the strong one. You have always been the rock. Just take care of her." The praise felt like ash in my mouth. The strong one. The rock. These weren't compliments. They were job descriptions. They were instructions to carry the load so that he and Marianne didn't have to. I hung up and looked around my kitchen. It was pristine. The counters were white quartz, unblemished. The sink was empty. I tried to tell myself it would be okay. It was just 14 days. I could handle anything for 14 days. I ran the logistics for a multi-million-dollar company. Surely I could manage one high-maintenance sister. I was the invisible engine of this family. That is what I told myself. I kept the machine running. I fixed the problems before they became disasters. I could fix this too. I just needed to manage the variable. I went upstairs to the guest room. I wanted to be welcoming if I treated her like a guest. Maybe she would act like one. Maybe she would respect the expiration date of her stay. I stripped the bed and put on the fresh sheets I usually saved for when I had the flu. The high thread count Egyptian cotton ones. I fluffed the pillows. I went into the bathroom and laid out a stack of fresh white towels, folded in perfect thirds. I even put a small basket of toiletries on the vanity. Travel-sized shampoo. A new toothbrush. A bar of lavender soap. It looked like a hotel room. It looked temporary. I stood in the doorway, surveying my work. It was a peace offering. It was a signal that said, "I love you, I support you, but this is a visit." Then, I heard it. A low mechanical rumble from the street. It grew louder, shaking the window pane in its frame. It wasn't the purr of a luxury SUV. It was the heavy, grinding idle of a diesel engine. I walked to the window and pulled back the sheer curtain. My stomach didn't just drop. It vanished. Parked directly in front of my driveway, blocking my mailbox and half of the neighbor's curb, was a moving truck. It was not a small van. It was a 26-foot box truck, the kind you rent when you are moving a 4-bedroom house across the country. The back gate rolled up with a clatter. 2 men in coveralls jumped out. Marianne pulled up behind them in her Range Rover, honking twice. Cheerful and bright, she hopped out of the car, wearing oversized sunglasses and a scarf that fluttered in the wind. She pointed at my front door, directing the movers like a general on a battlefield. I watched as the first mover hoisted a garment rack onto the pavement. It was jammed full of winter coats, evening gowns, and furs. The second mover began unloading boxes, not 1 or 2 suitcases, boxes, dozens of them, boxes marked kitchen, boxes marked shoes, boxes marked fragile. Then came the lighting equipment, a ring light on a tripod, a green screen backdrop. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass of the window. She had not packed for 2 weeks. She had not packed for a transition. She had packed for an occupation. The renovation at Dad's house was a lie. The nowhere to go was a script. Marianne wasn't visiting. She was moving in. And judging by the amount of furniture currently being wrestled down the ramp of that truck, she had absolutely no intention of leaving. I watched her laugh at something one of the movers said, tossing her hair back. She looked up at my window, unable to see me through the reflection of the glass, and checked her makeup in the side mirror of the truck. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from Marianne. "Here, can you open the garage? The guys need a place to put my reformer Pilates machine." I stared at the text. A Pilates machine. I didn't reply. I just stood there, watching the invasion force breach the perimeter of my life. Realizing with a sinking heart that my written rules were about to be used as doormats. The invisible engine was about to be overrun. The invasion did not happen all at once. It happened box by designer box, rack by garment rack, until the oxygen in my hallway was replaced entirely by the smell of expensive perfume and entitlement. I stood by the front door, holding it open as the 2 movers wrestled a velvet chaise lounge through the frame. It was a piece of furniture I had seen in magazines. the kind that serves no practical purpose other than to drape oneself across while weeping dramatically. They set it down in the center of my entryway, effectively blocking the path to the kitchen. Marianne swept past them, clutching a venti iced coffee as if it were a holy relic. She did not say thank you to the men sweating under the weight of her life. She stopped in the middle of my living room, lowered her sunglasses to the bridge of her nose, and slowly pirouetted, scanning the space. My townhouse was not a mansion. It was a sensible, two-bedroom unit in a quiet development called The Gables. I had spent 3 years curating it. I liked my mid-century modern armchair. I liked my minimalist bookshelves. I liked that everything had a place. Marianne pursed her lips. "It is cute," she said, the word dragging out like a reluctant apology. She looked at my beige walls and my sensible rug. "In a starter home sort of way, it is very efficient, Stella." "It is my home," I said, stepping around a box labeled Winter Skincare. "And please tell the movers not to scratch the hardwood. I just had it refinished." Marianne ignored me. She walked toward the stairs, trailing a hand along the banister. "Where is the master?" she asked. "I need to lie down. The stress of the drive has completely misaligned my spine." "The master is at the top of the stairs on the left," I said, pointing. "But the guest room is on the right. That is where you will be staying." I put fresh towels on the bed. Marianne stopped on the 3rd step. She turned around slowly, looking down at me with an expression of genuine confusion, as if I had just spoken to her in a dead language. "The guest room?" she repeated. "Stella, honey, does the guest room have an ensuite bathroom?" "No," I said. "The guest bath is in the hallway. It has a shower." "A shower," she deadpanned. "Stella, I am going through a divorce. I am in a state of spiritual and emotional collapse. I need a soaking tub. I need space for my evening routine. I cannot be expected to walk into a hallway like a common boarder to wash my face. I need the master." My hand tightened on the doorknob. This was the first test. If I folded now, I would be sleeping on my own couch within 3 days. "No," I said. Marianne blinked. "Excuse me?" "No," I repeated, keeping my voice level. "I am working full-time. I have to be up at 6 o'clock every morning. I need my own bathroom and my own bed. The guest room is perfectly comfortable. It has a queen-size bed and a view of the garden. If that does not work for you, I can call the Ritz back." For a second, I thought she was going to scream. Her nostrils flared. The air in the room grew static. Then, she let out a long, tragic sigh, her shoulders slumping as if I had physically struck her. "Fine," she whispered, shaking her head. "If you want to kick your sister when she is down, that is your choice. I will just make do. I suppose suffering is part of my journey now." She marched up the stairs, her heels clicking loudly on the wood. "Put the boxes in the hall," she yelled down to the movers. "Do not touch the garment bags with dirty hands." By 6 o'clock that evening, the movers were gone, and my house looked like a bomb had detonated inside a department store. There were boxes stacked 4 feet high in the hallway. There were garment racks blocking the television. I went into the kitchen to start dinner, needing the familiarity of chopping vegetables to calm my nerves. I found Marianne sitting at my dining table. The table, which I usually kept clear except for a simple centerpiece, was gone. In its place was a mountain of chaos. She had dumped the contents of 3 large boxes onto the surface: makeup palettes, hair extensions, ring lights, tripods, and tangled charging cables covered every square inch of the mahogany. "Marianne," I said, staring at the mess, "we eat dinner at this table." She didn't look up. She was holding a tube of lipstick up to the light, inspecting the shade. "We can eat on the couch," she said dismissively. "I need to sort my inventory. I have to figure out what fits my new single and healing brand. Besides, the lighting in here is terrible. We need to change these bulbs to cool white." "We are not changing the bulbs," I said, gripping the handle of the refrigerator. "And you cannot leave this here. I need this table for work sometimes." "Relax, Stella," she muttered, finally tossing the lipstick onto a pile of silk scarves. "It is just for a few days. You are so rigid. No wonder you are still single." I swallowed the retort that rose in my throat. 2 weeks, I told myself, 13 days and counting. I ate my dinner standing over the kitchen sink because there was nowhere else to sit. Marianne ordered sushi, charged it to the card I had foolishly not yet canceled, and ate it in her room with the door closed. The real violation began the next day. I went to the office for a half day of meetings. When I returned at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, hoping to finish some reports in the quiet of my living room, I unlocked the front door and walked into a production studio. My living room furniture had been rearranged. The heavy sofa I struggled to move by myself had been dragged to the far wall. My armchair was positioned in the center of the room, draped in a faux fur throw I did not own. Standing in front of the chair were 3 tripod lights, blazing at full intensity. The curtains were drawn shut to block out the natural light, and there, sitting in my chair, wearing a silk robe that slipped strategically off one shoulder, was Marianne. She was holding her phone, talking to the camera with a tearful, trembling expression that vanished the second she saw me. "Cut!" she yelled at the empty room, glaring at me. "Stella, I am filming. You just ruined the take. I was in the middle of a vulnerability breakthrough." "You moved my furniture," I said, dropping my laptop bag. "Marianne, what is all this?" "It is content," she said, standing up and tightening her robe. "I am launching a new series, Rebuilding Marianne. My followers need to see the raw reality of my grief. They need to see me rising from the ashes." "Rising from the ashes in my living room?" I asked. "I have to work. Marianne, I have a conference call at 3 o'clock. "Well, you will have to take it in your room," she said, waving a hand. "I need the acoustics down here, and do not use the microwave. The hum picks up on the mic." She sat back down, hit record, and instantly her face crumpled into a mask of tragic bravery. "Hey guys," she whispered to the phone, her voice cracking perfectly. "So, today has been really hard. I am just trying to find a safe space to breathe." I walked into the kitchen, my hands shaking. This was not grief. Grief does not require a ring light. Grief does not need 3 angles and a filter. This was theater. That night, the noise began. At 11 o'clock, I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to calculate shipping logistics for the West Coast Distribution Center. Suddenly, a bass beat began to thump through the floorboards. It was a repetitive, high-energy pop song. I put on my robe and went out into the hallway. The music was coming from downstairs. I went down to find Marianne in the living room, now wearing a tight workout set. She was dancing. Not just dancing, but performing a complex, choreographed routine while the music blasted from a portable speaker that was vibrating on my coffee table. "Marianne!" I shouted over the noise. "It is 11 o'clock. Turn it off." She didn't hear me. She spun around, hair whipping, and landed in a pose, looking at her phone, which was propped up against a stack of my books. I walked over and hit the power button on the speaker. The silence that followed was ringing. "What is wrong with you?" she shrieked, turning on me. "I was in the flow. That was the perfect take for TikTok." "It is 11 at night," I hissed. "I have neighbors. We have shared walls. You cannot blast music like this." "It is divorce recovery cardio," she yelled back. "My therapist said I need to move the trauma out of my body through dance." "Are you denying me my therapy, Stella? Do you want me to store the trauma in my hips?" "I want you to store the trauma in silence," I said. "Go to bed." She rolled her eyes, grabbed her phone, and stormed upstairs. "You are such a killjoy. No wonder your house feels like a mausoleum." The next morning, the email arrived. It was from the Homeowners Association. Subject: noise complaint and unapproved commercial activity. I opened it, my heart sinking. "Dear Ms. Davis, we received multiple complaints last night regarding excessive noise coming from your unit between the hours of 10 and 11:30. Additionally, It has been brought to our attention that professional filming equipment has been seen entering the residence, and there is significant foot traffic. Please be reminded that Section 4.2 of the HOA bylaws prohibits operating a commercial business from a residential unit, and Section 9 prohibits noise disturbances after 10 o'clock. A fine of $200 has been assessed to your account. I stared at the screen. $200. I printed the email and walked into the kitchen, where Marianne was making a smoothie using my expensive organic berries. "We got a fine," I said, slapping the paper onto the counter. $200, because of your trauma dance last night." Marianne glanced at the paper and shrugged. "God, your neighbors are such Karens. Who complains about music at 11? It is practically still evening." "It is night, Marianne, and they are complaining about the filming too. The HOA thinks I am running a production studio. You have to stop." She poured the smoothie into a glass and took a sip. "I cannot stop. Stella, this is my job now. I have 10,000 followers waiting for my update. If I don't post, the algorithm punishes me. You wouldn't understand. You don't have an audience." "I have a mortgage," I snapped, "and I have to live here after you leave. You are paying this fine." "I don't have any cash right now," she said smoothly, walking past me toward the living room. "Just put it on my tab. I will pay you back when the settlement clears. You know I am good for it." She wasn't good for it. We both knew that. Marianne had never paid a bill on time in her life. I watched her go, the anger in my chest hardening into something cold and sharp. I went to my home office, which she had fortunately not yet invaded because the door locked, and opened my desk drawer. I took out a fresh notebook. I sat down and wrote the date at the top of the page. Incident log. Tuesday, October 3rd. Moving truck blocked neighbor's driveway for 4 hours. Unauthorized rearrangement of living room furniture. Wednesday, October 4th. Noise complaint. $200 fine. Refusal to reimburse. I picked up my phone and opened my banking app. I took a screenshot of the grocery charge from the day before. Whole Foods, $340. I printed it. I taped it into the notebook. Then I went downstairs. Marianne was back in the living room, adjusting her ring light. She didn't see me. I took my phone out and snapped a photo of the chaotic mess she had made of my sanctuary. The wires, the lights, the displaced furniture. I printed that too. I wasn't just observing anymore. I was building a case. Marianne thought she was the main character in a tragedy about a woman scorned. She thought this house was just a set for her comeback story. She thought I was just the prop master, here to pay the fines and clean up the mess. She was wrong. I watched her smile into the camera, a practiced, synthetic expression of hope. "Today is a new day," she told her imaginary friends, "and I am learning to set boundaries." I almost laughed. She was right about one thing. It was entitlement wearing grief like a perfume. It was heavy, cloying, and it covered up the stench of who she really was. But perfume fades, and when it did, I intended to be the one holding the air freshener. I closed the notebook and locked it in the drawer. Day 2. I thought, 12 to go. But deep down, looking at the way her coat rack had taken root in my hallway like a stubborn weed, I knew she had no intention of leaving in 12 days. She was digging in, so I started digging too. But while she was digging for attention, I was digging a trench. The vibration of my phone against the marble countertop of the coffee shop did not sound like an alarm, but in hindsight, it was the first siren of the collapse. It was Thursday afternoon, just 2 days after the moving truck had blocked the street. I was trying to salvage a productive workday remotely, escaping the chaotic, creative energy of my own living room, where Marianne was currently filming a segment on mindful breathing while simultaneously yelling at a delivery driver. I picked up the phone, expecting an email from logistics. Instead, a red banner from my banking app slashed across the screen. Transaction declined. Credit limit reached. I stared at the notification. My heart gave a strange, syncopated thump. That card was the emergency Amex. It was the specific card I had handed to Marianne exactly 48 hours ago with a very clear, very specific instruction: This is for groceries and household essentials only. I had set the limit at $2,500, a generous amount, a safety net, enough to feed a family of 4 for a month, let alone one woman for 2 weeks. I opened the app, my thumb hovering over the Recent Transactions tab. A cold knot formed in my stomach, a physical reaction to the digital evidence I was about to uncover. I tapped the screen. The list populated instantly, scrolling down and down like a receipt from hell. There were no charges for Whole Foods. There were no charges for Kroger or Trader Joe's. There was not a single carton of milk or loaf of bread on the ledger. Instead, I saw a timeline of indulgence that was almost impressive in its gluttony. Tuesday, 4:30 in the afternoon. The spa at the Levesque, $640. Tuesday, 8:15 in the evening. The Pearl Restaurant, $212. Wednesday, 10 in the morning. Lululemon, $480. Wednesday, 1 in the afternoon. Uber Black, $85. Wednesday, 2:30 in the afternoon. Sephora, $315. Thursday, 9 in the morning. Recurring subscription. Manifest Your Wealth. Masterclass, $999. I felt sick. It was a visceral nausea, hot and rising. She had not just spent the money, she had incinerated it. She had burned through $2,500 in less than 2 days on massages, leggings, and a fraudulent online course about manifesting wealth while she was actively stealing mine. I closed my laptop. I didn't even save the spreadsheet I was working on. I shoved everything into my bag, marched out of the coffee shop, and got into my car. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned the color of bone. It wasn't just the money. I could survive losing $2,000. It was the audacity. It was the absolute, unrepentant violation of the one boundary I had set. It was the realization that to Marianne, I was not a sister. I was a resource. I was an ATM with a pulse. I drove home, rehearsing the confrontation in my head. I would be calm. I would be factual. I would demand the card back, demand a repayment plan, and set a hard move-out date for the following Sunday. Logic would be my weapon. I walked into my house. The living room was empty of people, but full of evidence. A new Lululemon bag sat on the coffee table. A half-eaten container of expensive takeout sat on a coaster I had brought back from Italy. "Marianne?" I called out. "In the kitchen," she chirped. Her voice was light, airy, completely unburdened by conscience. I walked into the kitchen. She was leaning against the counter, wearing the new leggings she had bought with my money, peeling a tangerine. She looked radiant, refreshed. "Hey," she said, popping a slice of fruit into her mouth. "You are home early. Did you get fired?" "The card was declined," I said. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. I held up my phone, the transaction list glowing on the screen. Marianne stopped chewing. She didn't look guilty. She looked annoyed. She looked like a customer whose coupon had been rejected. "Oh, that," she said, waving a hand dismissively. "Yeah, I was trying to buy this really cute oversized blazer at Nordstrom, and the cashier said it wouldn't go through. It was so embarrassing. Stella, you really should have warned me the limit was so low. I looked like a pauper." "The limit was $2,500, I said, my voice shaking despite my best efforts to keep it steady. "I gave you that card 2 days ago. I told you it was for groceries." "I needed things," she said, turning back to her tangerine. "You spent $600 at a spa," I said, reading from the phone. "You spent $500 on yoga pants. You spent $1,000 on a wealth manifestation course. Marianne, how is any of this groceries?" She spun around, her face flushing with sudden, righteous indignation. The pivot was instant. She went from casual to victim in the span of a heartbeat. "I needed to feel human again," she shouted. The volume was shocking in the small kitchen. "My husband just left me. My life is in shambles. I am living in a guest room in the suburbs. I needed a massage to release the tension so I didn't have a stroke. I needed clothes that didn't remind me of my life with him. I am investing in my mental health. Stella, God, you are so transactional. Do you put a price tag on my sanity? I put a price tag on my credit card bill, I shot back. You stole from me. This is theft. Marianne, you used my money to buy luxury items while I am working to pay the mortgage that keeps a roof over your head. It is not theft, she screamed. It is family resources. Dad said you would take care of me. This is taking care of me. What did you expect me to do? Eat ramen and cry in the dark? I expected you to buy food, I yelled. I want the card back, now, and you are paying me back every single cent. I am deducting it from whatever settlement you get, or I am taking it out of your hide, and you are leaving. I want you out by Sunday. Marianne's eyes narrowed. The tears that had been threatening to spill suddenly vanished, replaced by a cold, calculating glimmer. She reached into her pocket, pulled out her phone, and dialed a number. She put it on speaker. Daddy, she sobbed. It was a performance worthy of an Academy Award. Her voice broke into 1,000 jagged pieces. She slumped against the counter, sliding down slightly as if her legs could no longer support the weight of her grief. Marianne? Dad's voice boomed from the phone. What is it? What happened? It is Stella, she wailed, looking directly at me with eyes that were dry and hard as flint. She is screaming at me. She is screaming at me over food. Dad, I bought some lunch because I was too depressed to cook, and she came home and started yelling that I'm spending too much money. She is threatening to kick me out on the street because I bought a salad. I stood there, frozen. The lie was so breathless, so complete, that I couldn't even find the air to interrupt. Stella, Dad's voice was a thunderclap. Put her on. Is she there? She is standing right here watching me cry, Marianne whispered into the phone. Stella, he roared. I stepped forward, my own anger cold and sharp now. I am here, Dad. She spent $2,500 in 48 hours. She bought a spa package and Lululemon gear. She didn't buy a salad. Oh my God, Marianne gasped. See? She is obsessing over every penny. She is tracking me like a criminal. Dad, I just wanted to feel pretty for one day. I felt so ugly after he left me. Enough, Dad snapped. Stella, I am disappointed in you. Your sister is in crisis. She is not thinking clearly. She is grabbing at life rafts. And you are worried about a credit card bill? I told you to take care of her. This isn't taking care of her, I said. This is enabling her. She is robbing me. Stop it, he said. Just stop it. You are embarrassing yourself. You can afford it. You have that fancy job. You have no kids. You have no expenses. Absorb the cost. Stella, be the big sister for once. I am the younger sister, I protested, a childish plea escaping me before I could stop it. Then act like an adult, he countered. Fix this. Apologize to her. He hung up. The silence in the kitchen was deafening. Marianne slowly lowered the phone. She wiped a non-existent tear from her cheek and stood up straight. The slump was gone. The tremble was gone. She smirked. See? She said softly. He gets it. Then her phone pinged. She looked at it and smiled. Oh, and check your texts. My phone buzzed. I looked down. A message from Howard Davis. Stop punishing your sister. 4 words. A command. A dismissal of my reality. I looked at Marianne. She was already turning away, reaching for another tangerine, confident in her victory. She thought the battle was over. She thought she had established the hierarchy. She was the princess. Dad was the king. And I was the peasant who paid the taxes. Give me the card, I said. My voice was very quiet. Fine, she said, digging the platinum card out of her bra. A theatrical gesture meant to annoy me. She tossed it onto the counter. It is maxed out anyway. Useless. She walked out of the kitchen, her new leggings swishing softly. I am going to take a bath, she called out over her shoulder. Try not to be so loud when you are cooking dinner. I stood in the kitchen for a long time. I listened to the water running in the pipes as she filled my bathtub upstairs. I picked up the card. I took a pair of kitchen shears from the drawer and cut it into 4 pieces. The plastic crunch was satisfying. But it wasn't enough. I went to my laptop. I didn't just cancel the card. I called the bank and reported it lost. I froze my credit with all 3 bureaus: Equifax, Experian, TransUnion. I logged into every single financial portal I had: retirement, savings, checking, investment, and I initiated a reset all sessions command. I changed my passwords, every single one. No more Stella 1992. No more variations of my dog's name. I used a random generator, strings of 16 characters that looked like gibberish. XJ9MP2 LK7. I enabled 2-factor authentication on everything, linking it to an authenticator app, not just SMS. Then, I went to the filing cabinet in my home office. I took out my birth certificate, my passport, my social security card, the deed to the house, and the title to my car. I put them in a fireproof lockbox. Then I put that lockbox inside a larger storage bin at the bottom of my closet, buried under winter sweaters. I was not just securing my money, I was securing my identity. I worked late that night, fueled by a mixture of adrenaline and rage. I didn't cook dinner. I didn't speak to Marianne when she came down, glowing and pink from her bath, to complain that there was no food. I just kept typing, locking down the digital perimeter of my life. At 2 a.m, the house was finally quiet. Marianne had gone to bed after loudly ordering a pizza and leaving the box on the coffee table. I couldn't sleep. I felt vibrating. Like a plucked wire, I needed water. I walked downstairs in the dark, not turning on the lights, navigating by memory. The moonlight was spilling through the blinds, casting long, barred shadows across the floor. As I passed the door to my home office, I stopped. I had closed that door. I remembered closing it. I always closed it. It clicked when it shut. It was ajar, just an inch, a sliver of darkness darker than the hallway. I pushed it open gently. The room was silent, but it wasn't how I had left it. The air felt disturbed. I walked to my desk and turned on the small lamp. My desk chair was pulled out, rotated slightly to the left. I always pushed it in. I looked at the surface of the desk, my stack of pending invoices, which I kept perfectly aligned with the edge of the blotter, was skewed. The papers were fanned out, just slightly, as if someone had thumbed through them and tried to put them back in a hurry. I opened the top drawer. My heart hammered against my ribs. The hanging file folders were usually color-coded and spaced evenly. The green folder, bank statements, was sticking up higher than the rest. The red folder, mortgage documents, was pushed to the back. Someone had been in here. Marianne hadn't just been looking for a stapler or a pen. I pulled out the bank statements folder. It felt lighter. I flipped through it. The statements from 2 years ago, the ones that showed the large bonus I had received, the ones that showed the substantial transfer I had made to a high-yield savings account separate from the family bank, were missing. I checked the trash can under the desk. Empty. She hadn't thrown them away. She had taken them. I sat down in my chair, the leather cold against my legs. A chill that had nothing to do with the temperature settled into my bones. This wasn't just about a sister mooching off her sibling. This wasn't just about a free place to stay or a maxed-out credit card. Marianne wasn't just impulsive and selfish. She was hunting. She was looking for my net worth. She was looking for leverage. She was looking for exactly how much blood she could squeeze from the stone. She had waited until I was asleep, crept downstairs, and systematically went through my financial history. That wasn't the behavior of a grieving woman. That was the behavior of an auditor or a predator. I looked at the empty space in the file folder where my financial privacy used to be. "Okay," I whispered to the empty room. "Okay." The fear evaporated, replaced by a cold, crystalline focus. I had thought I was dealing with a messy houseguest. I had thought I was dealing with a brat. But I was dealing with a spy. I opened my laptop again. I didn't go to my bank. I opened a blank email draft. I typed one sentence: exit plan. Then, I opened a new browser tab. I searched for burner phones near me. If they wanted a war, they were going to get one. but they wouldn't see the troops coming until the city was already surrounded. Friday morning at Hawthorne and Row Interiors usually began with a deceptive sense of calm. The sunlight filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of our fourth-floor headquarters, illuminating the fabric swatches and architectural blueprints scattered across the open-plan office. I loved this time of day. It was the only time my life felt geometric, calculable, and under my control. I was the vice president of operations, a title I had bled for, and in this building, I was not the younger sister or the disappointment. I was the person who made the numbers work. I sat at my desk, sipping black coffee, reviewing the logistics for a large commercial installation in Cincinnati. For a moment, just a fleeting moment, I forgot about the invader in my guest room and the hole in my file cabinet. I forgot about the missing bank statements. I was in my element, surrounded by the hum of productivity. Then, the elevator doors at the end of the hallway chimed. It was a soft sound, barely audible over the low murmur of phone calls. But what followed was a disruption so violent it felt like a physical blow. "Stella!" The voice boomed across the lobby, ricocheting off the polished concrete floors and the glass partitions. It was not the voice of a CEO greeting his staff. It was the voice of a father calling a disobedient child in for a whipping. I froze. My hand hovered over my mouse. Every head in the office turned. The designers looked up from their drafting tables. The account managers stopped typing. The silence that swept through the room was instant and suffocating. Howard Davis stormed past the reception desk. The receptionist, a young woman named Sarah, who was terrified of him on a good day, half rose from her chair, stammering something about a visitor badge, but he didn't even look at her. He marched down the central aisle, his heavy footsteps thudding against the floor. He was wearing his charcoal suit, the one he wore for board meetings, but his tie was slightly askew, and his face was a terrifying shade of crimson. He was not looking at the employees. He was looking at me. I stood up. I had to. To remain seated would have been an act of submission I could not stomach, even as my heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs. "Dad," I said, keeping my voice low, trying to contain the blast radius. "I have a client call in 10 minutes. Can we talk in your office?" He didn't stop until he was standing 2 feet from my desk. He loomed over me, breathing hard, radiating the specific heat of a man who has been told no and has never learned how to process it. "We will talk right now," he shouted. He didn't care who was watching. In fact, I realized with a sick twist of my stomach, he wanted them to watch. He wanted an audience. "Get in the conference room." He didn't wait for me to agree. He reached out, grabbed my upper arm, and pulled. It wasn't a violent yank, not enough to leave a bruise, but the indignity of it, the physical manhandling of a 34-year-old executive in front of her subordinates, burned hotter than a slap. He marched me toward the main conference room. We called it the fishbowl. It was a glass-walled box in the center of the office, designed for transparency and collaboration. It had no blinds. It offered zero privacy. Every word we said would be muffled, but every gesture, every expression, every ounce of my humiliation would be on display for the entire company to see. He shoved the door open and gestured for me to go in. I walked inside, my legs feeling like lead. He followed, slamming the glass door so hard the frame shuddered. "Sit down," he ordered. I remained standing. I placed my hands on the back of a leather chair to steady them. "What is this about? Dad? You are making a scene." "I am making a scene?" He laughed, a harsh barking sound. "You are making a mess. Stella, Marianne called me this morning in hysterics. She said you froze the credit card. She said you threatened to evict her by Sunday. Is that true?" "Yes," I said. "It is true." I reached into the folder I had brought with me, my armor. I pulled out the printed bank statement and the email from the Homeowners Association. I slid them across the sleek conference table toward him. "Look at the numbers." "Dad," I said, my voice steady but urgent. "Look at them. I gave her that card for food. She spent $2,500 in 2 days. She spent $600 at a spa. She spent $1,000 on an online course. She isn't buying groceries. She is lighting my money on fire. He didn't look down. He didn't even glance at the papers. He swept his hand across the table, knocking the evidence onto the floor. The papers fluttered down like dead leaves. "I don't care about the money," he yelled. "I care about loyalty. Your sister is broken. Stella, she is fragile. Her husband just walked out on her. Her life is in ruins, and you are counting pennies? You are auditing her like she is a thief?" "She is a thief," I countered. "She stole my financial records from my home office last night. She went through my files while I was asleep." "She was probably looking for a stamp," Howard shouted. "You are paranoid." "You have always been jealous of her, haven't you? You see her struggling, and you want to kick her while she is down. It is cruel. It is ugly." I felt the blood drain from my face. Jealous? I looked at him, at the man I had spent my entire life trying to impress, the man whose approval I had chased with high grades, long hours, and perfect obedience. He didn't see me. He never had. He only saw a support system for his golden child. "I am not jealous," I said quietly. "I am being used, and I am done being used. She leaves on Sunday. Dad, or I call the police and have her removed for trespassing." The air in the room changed. The heat of his anger condensed into something colder, sharper. He stopped shouting. He leaned in close, placing both hands on the table, invading my personal space until I could smell his coffee breath. "You listen to me," he hissed. His voice was low now, but it carried more weight than the shouting had. "You don't call the police. You don't kick her out. You go home tonight, you apologize to your sister, and you give her a new card with a higher limit. You cook her dinner. You make her feel welcome." "And if I don't?" I asked. He smiled. It was a terrible smile. It was the smile he wore when he acquired a competitor and stripped it for parts. "If you kick her out," he said, enunciating every syllable, "you are done here." I stared at him. "You would fire me? Over a family dispute?" "I won't just fire you," he said. "I will destroy you. I will tell everyone in this city that you were embezzling funds. I will tell them you were incompetent. I will make sure that the name Stella Davis is toxic in this industry. You won't get a job managing a warehouse, let alone running operations. You will lose your income. You will lose that house you are so proud of. You will have nothing." He straightened up, adjusting his cufflinks. "Housing is the leash, Stella," he said, almost casually. "Employment is the collar, and I hold the lead. Do you understand me?" I looked past him. Through the glass walls, I saw Sarah at the reception desk, pretending to type but watching us with wide, fearful eyes. I saw the junior designers whispering. They had seen the shouting. They had seen the papers fly. They saw their vice president being dressed down like a naughty child. My credibility was bleeding out on the conference room floor. But in that moment, something else happened. The fear that had ruled my life, the fear of his anger, the fear of failure, suddenly snapped. It broke under the weight of his cruelty. He had shown his hand. He had admitted that my career, my hard work, my 10 years of service to this company meant nothing to him. I was not an asset. I was a hostage. "I understand," I said. My voice was devoid of emotion. I sounded like a machine. "Good," he said. "Now pick up those papers and get back to work. And fix this with Marianne tonight." He turned and walked out. He didn't look back. He stormed through the lobby and out the front doors, leaving a wake of devastation behind him. I stood in the glass box for a long moment. I slowly bent down and picked up the papers, the bank statement, the noise complaint. I smoothed them out. I walked out of the conference room. The office was dead silent. People quickly looked down at their screens. Pretending they hadn't just witnessed my execution, I kept my head high. I walked back to my desk. I sat down. My hands were trembling, but my mind was crystal clear. I had been playing by the rules of a game that was rigged. I had thought that if I was good enough, smart enough, profitable enough, I would be safe. But safety was an illusion. As long as I worked for him, I was property. I woke up my computer. I opened my personal email account, the one on the private server I had set up years ago, the one he didn't know about. I clicked compose. I didn't address it to anyone. I didn't write a subject line. I just typed 2 words in the body of the email. Exit plan. I saved it to drafts. It wasn't a message. It was a promise to myself. I worked the rest of the day in a fugue state. I answered emails. I approved shipping manifests. I acted like nothing had happened. But every time I looked at the Hawthorne and Rowe logo, I felt a wave of revulsion. At 5 o'clock, I packed my bag. I didn't stay late. I walked out of the building, got into my car, and drove away. I didn't go home. Not yet. I drove to a strip mall on the edge of town, 3 suburbs over, where I was unlikely to run into anyone I knew. I parked in front of a discount electronics store. I walked in and bought a prepaid burner phone, the cheapest one they had, a plastic flip phone that looked like a relic from 2005. I paid cash. I sat in my car and opened the packaging. I inserted the battery and the SIM card. The screen lit up with a pixelated blue glow. I had one number to program into it. I had met Kendra Holt 3 years ago at a networking event. She was a commercial real estate shark who ate developers for breakfast. She had told me once, after 3 martinis, "If you ever want to sell a property and make the neighbors disappear, call me. I don't ask questions. I just close deals." I had saved her card in the bottom of my wallet, thinking it was a joke. Now, I knew it was a lifeline. I typed her number into the burner phone. I didn't save it under her name. I saved it under a single letter, K. I put the phone in the glove compartment and locked it. My father thought he had put a collar on me. He thought he had tightened the leash, but he had made a fatal error. He had forgotten that I was the one who built the company's logistics network. I knew how to move things. I knew how to disappear things, and soon, I was going to disappear myself. The weekend arrived not with a sigh of relief, but with the suffocating pressure of a submarine diving past its crush depth. The confrontation in the glass conference room had shifted the atmosphere in my house from tense to toxic. Marianne was no longer just an annoying houseguest. She was an operative, and I was no longer a sister. I was a target on Saturday morning. Marianne sat at my kitchen counter, which she had finally cleared of her makeup, only to cover it with brochures for luxury condos in the Short North District. She was circling images of penthouses with a red marker, humming to herself. "What are you doing?" I asked, pouring coffee. I was watching her hands. I watched her hands constantly now. "Manifesting," she said, tapping a photo of a 2-bedroom loft with floor-to-ceiling windows. "My settlement is going to be huge. Stella, Julian is going to have to pay through the nose for the emotional distress he caused me. My lawyer says we are looking at 7 figures. Easy. I just need to be ready to buy when the wire hits." "When is that happening?" I asked. "The wire?" "Soon," she waved a hand vaguely. "Lawyers are so slow. You know how it is. Discovery, depositions, blah, blah, blah. But it is coming. Any day now." She couldn't give me a date. She couldn't name the judge. She couldn't even tell me her lawyer's last name when I pressed her, claiming she didn't want to jinx it. It was a fog of words, designed to obscure the fact that there was nothing solid behind them. Then, the mail carrier arrived. I heard the distinct clack of the mail slot. Usually, on Saturdays, it was just junk mail and coupons. But today, there was a heavy thud on the floor, followed by the doorbell. "I will get it!" Marianne shouted. She moved faster than I had ever seen her move. She literally vaulted off the bar stool, sprinting to the front door before I could even set my mug down. I walked into the hallway just in time to see her signing a digital pad for the mail carrier. She snatched a thick white envelope from his hand. "What is that?" I asked, stepping forward. Marianne clutched the envelope to her chest, covering the return address with her forearm. Her eyes were wide, frantic, but her mouth forced a smile that looked like a rictus of pain. "Nothing," she chirped. "Just divorce papers, boring legal stuff. I don't want to bore you with the details." but I had seen the corner of the envelope before she hid it. It didn't say family court. It didn't have the letterhead of a divorce attorney. The logo was red and black. It said, Harriman and Associates. I knew that name. In my line of work, dealing with vendors and contractors, I knew the reputations of the local firms. Harriman and Associates was not a family law practice. They were a high-aggression collections group. They were the people you hired when someone owed you a lot of money and refused to pay. Marianne, I said, that looked like a certified letter. It is just a notification about Julian's assets, she lied, backing away toward the stairs. I have to take this call. My lawyer is probably waiting. She ran up the stairs and slammed the guest room door. I heard the lock click. A certified letter from a debt collector does not come for a wealthy woman waiting on $1 million settlement. It comes for someone who is drowning. Paranoia is a strange thing. It makes you feel crazy, but it also makes you hyper-aware. My senses were dialed up to 11. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator. I could hear the wind against the siding. And 20 minutes later, I could hear Marianne's voice drifting through the air vent in the hallway ceiling. The ductwork in my townhome was old. Sound traveled strangely. If you stood in the exact right spot in the downstairs hallway, right under the intake vent, you could hear conversations in the guest room as if they were happening next to you. I stood there, holding my breath. Marianne was on speakerphone. I knew the other voice instantly. It was the booming, authoritative baritone of our father. She is watching me like a hawk. Dad, Marianne was saying. Her voice was low, urgent. She saw the mail today. I had to intercept it. It is getting dangerous. Calm down. Howard's voice crackled through the vent. Does she know about the loan? No, Marianne said. But she locked the credit card. She is cutting me off. What if she checks her credit report? You said you would handle the inquiries. I am handling it, Howard snapped. I have a guy at the bank who can suppress the notifications for a few weeks. We just need to bridge it for now. Just get her to sign the occupancy paperwork. Once we have that, we have leverage. She is stubborn, Marianne whined. She has this equity. The house is worth $400,000. Dad, if we could just tap into that, I could pay off Harriman and get the creditors off my back. We will, Howard promised. She owes you this. She has had it easy her whole life. You are the one who needs the help. Just keep her calm. Do not let her throw you out. If she throws you out, the plan falls apart. I stepped away from the vent. My legs felt shaky, but my mind was ice cold. She has equity. They weren't talking about my emotional capacity. They were talking about my home equity. They were discussing the value of my property like it was a communal pie they were waiting to slice. I walked silently into my home office and locked the door. I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop. My hands were trembling, not from fear, but from a rage so pure it felt like clarity. I navigated to the credit bureau portal. I had frozen my credit on Thursday, but I hadn't looked at the detailed report for inquiries made before the freeze. I pulled the full report. I scanned the list of soft inquiries. These are checks that don't impact your score, usually done by lenders to see if you qualify for pre-approved offers. But sometimes, they are done by someone testing the waters. There were 5 inquiries in the last week. Quicklend Mortgage Solutions, Ohio Valley Home Equity, Fast Cash Refinance. I didn't authorize any of these. I had a 30-year fixed mortgage at 3% interest. I had zero reason to look for a loan. Someone was shopping my credit profile. Someone was trying to see how much cash they could pull out of my house. And since Marianne couldn't do that without my social security number, and Howard had mentioned a guy at the bank, the picture was coming into terrifying focus. They were trying to take out a home equity line of credit in my name. Or, worse, they were trying to forge my signature on a loan application, using my house as collateral to pay off Marianne's debts. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I went into crisis management mode. First, I logged into my payroll portal for work. I had direct deposit set up to a checking account at Chase, the same bank my family used, the same bank where Howard apparently had a guy. I opened a new tab. I went to the website of an online-only bank. One with no physical branches in Ohio, one that had no connection to the Davis family dynasty. I opened a new checking account. It took 10 minutes. I went back to the payroll portal. I deleted the Chase account details. I entered the new bank's routing and account numbers. My next paycheck was due on Friday. If I timed this right, the money would land in a fortress they couldn't touch. Next, I set up a fraud alert on my credit file. A freeze stops new accounts, but a fraud alert requires lenders to call me personally at a verified number before extending credit. I used the number of the burner phone I had bought, the phone currently hidden in the spare tire well of my car. I was closing the gates. Later that afternoon, the second prong of their attack arrived. I was in the living room, pretending to read a book. When Marianne came downstairs, she was holding a single sheet of paper. She looked refreshed, smiling that practiced, saccharine smile she used when she wanted something. "Hey, Stell," she said, breezy and casual. "So, I was thinking about the mail situation. It is annoying that I have to race to the door to get my legal stuff, right?" "It is," I agreed, not looking up from the page. "So, I found this standard form online," she said, sliding the paper onto the coffee table in front of me. "It just authorizes the post office to officially deliver my mail here without any mix-ups. And it helps with my insurance, since I am technically displaced. It is just a temporary occupancy affidavit. Super standard. Dad said I should have you sign it so everything is above board." I looked at the document. It looked official. It had a lot of dense legal text. Affidavit of residence and tenancy. I picked it up. Marianne watched me, her body tense, her breath held. I read the second paragraph. The undersigned homeowner acknowledges that the resident, Marianne Davis, has established tenancy at the property located at 124 Oak Creek Drive, and is entitled to all rights and protections afforded to tenants under Ohio Revised Code Section 5321. I looked up at her. "This isn't a mail forwarding form, Marianne," I said. "This is a lease." "It is not a lease," she laughed. A nervous, high-pitched sound. "It doesn't have rent or anything. It just says I live here. For the mail." "No," I said, tapping the paper. "It says you have established tenancy. In Ohio, if I sign this, I cannot kick you out without a formal eviction process that takes 60 to 90 days. It grants you legal rights to the property." Her smile faltered. The corners of her mouth twitched. "You are being paranoid again," she said, her voice sharpening. "Why do you always think the worst of me? I am your sister. I am just trying to get my insurance sorted out." "I am not signing it," I said. I folded the paper and put it in my pocket. "I will keep this for my records." "Give that back," she snapped. She reached for it, her fingernails grazing my wrist. I pulled back. "No, you can print another one if you want, but I am not signing anything. And Marianne, if you try to forge my signature on this, I will have a forensic handwriting analyst look at it before the ink is dry." The mask didn't just slip. It shattered. Her face contorted into a look of pure, unadulterated hatred. It was ugly. It was the face of a cornered animal that realizes the trap door is closed. "You are such a bitch," she hissed. "You have everything. You have this house. You have the job. You have the money. And you won't even help me with a piece of paper? You want me to starve? You want me to be homeless?" "I want you to be honest," I said. She stared at me for a long moment, breathing hard. Then, the anger vanished as quickly as it had arrived. She slumped her shoulders. Her eyes filled with instant tears. She covered her face with her hands. "I am sorry," she sobbed. "I am just so stressed. You don't know what it is like. Stella, Julian destroyed me. I am not thinking straight." She turned and ran back upstairs, the grieving victim once more, but I wasn't buying tickets to the show anymore. I waited until I heard her door close. Then I went back to my computer. I had one more mystery to solve. Julian. Marianne had painted a picture of a tragic divorce, abandonment, cruelty, an affair with a younger secretary. I went to the Franklin County Clerk of Court's website. Divorce records are public. I searched for Davis. Marianne versus Warrington. Julian. I found the docket. It was thick. There were dozens of filings. I opened the initial complaint. It wasn't Julian who had filed for divorce. It was Julian who had filed for a restraining order regarding assets. I read the allegations. Plaintiff alleges that defendant, Marianne Davis, engaged in the dissipation of marital assets, totaling $1.2 million over a period of 3 years. Plaintiff alleges defendant opened secret credit accounts in plaintiff's name. Plaintiff alleges defendant forged plaintiff's signature on a home equity loan application. I sat back in my chair, the cold light of the screen illuminating the room. There was no affair. There was no abuse. Julian hadn't left her because he found someone younger. He left her because she had bled him dry. She had done to him exactly what she was trying to do to me. She hadn't come to my house to recover. She hadn't come here to heal. Marianne was a locust. She had consumed everything in her previous field, and now she had moved on to the next available crop. Me. I looked at the ceiling, toward the room where she was likely plotting her next move. Harvest, I whispered. She moved into harvest. The realization settled over me like a shroud. This wasn't a family squabble. This was a survival situation. My father and my sister were working in tandem to strip mine my life to cover the debts she had racked up destroying someone else's. I closed the laptop. I touched the burner phone in my pocket. It was time to stop reacting. It was time to start the demolition. Sunday arrived with the deceptive brightness of a postcard. The sky was a piercing, innocent blue, completely at odds with the dread sitting heavy in my stomach. At 10 o'clock in the morning, my father summoned me. He didn't call it a summons. He called it brunch. He texted me the location. The Oakmont Country Club, a place where the waiters wore white gloves and the silence was measured in dollars per square foot. The text added, "Just the 3 of us. Let's reset." I drove there with my sunglasses on. Gripping the wheel, I knew what a reset meant in the Davis family dictionary. It meant I was expected to apologize for having boundaries, and they were graciously agreeing to accept my apology. When I arrived, they were already seated at a corner table overlooking the 18th hole. Marianne was wearing a pastel yellow sundress and oversized sunglasses, looking every inch the tragic socialite recovering from a scandal. Dad stood up to hug me. It was a firm, 2-pat embrace, the kind politicians give to constituents they don't particularly like but need a vote from. "There she is," Howard said, pulling out my chair. "My hard-working girl. You look tired. Stella, you are working too hard." "I am fine," I said, sitting down. "I am just busy." "We ordered for you," Marianne said, pointing to a plate of eggs Benedict that had already been placed at my setting. "I know it is your favorite. See? We pay attention." The first 20 minutes were a masterclass in gaslighting. They asked about my garden. They asked about the logistics division. They laughed. They acted as if the last 5 days, the screaming matches, the frozen credit cards, the stolen files, had never happened. It was disorienting. It was designed to make me feel like the crazy one, the only person holding on to a grudge in a world of sunshine and hollandaise sauce. Then, the plates were cleared. Howard ordered coffee. He leaned forward, clasping his hands on the white tablecloth. "Stella," he began, his voice dropping to that confidential, fatherly timbre he used when he wanted to sell a client on a questionable timeline. "I have been thinking. We got off on the wrong foot this week. Emotions were high. Marianne is hurting. You are stressed. And I was, perhaps, too forceful." I stared at him. An apology? From Howard Davis? "I appreciate that, Dad," I said cautiously. "But the reality remains," he continued, the pivot coming smooth and fast. "Marianne needs a bridge. The settlement with Julian is complicated. It is going to take time to untangle the assets. And in the meantime, she has expenses, legal fees, living costs. She needs to maintain her standing in the community. I am living on air. Stella, Marianne whispered, touching my hand. Her palm was clammy. I just need a little breathing room. So, Howard said, reaching into his jacket pocket, I found a solution, a way to handle this without you having to dip into your savings or worry about grocery bills. He slid a document across the table. It wasn't a check. It was a loan application. It is a short-term personal loan, Howard explained. $50,000. Just enough to cover her legal retainers and get her a deposit on a condo when the time comes. I arranged it with a private lender I know. Very discreet. I looked at the paper. The borrower was listed as Marianne Davis. The cosigner line was highlighted with a sticky note that said, "Sign here." Why do you need a cosigner? I asked, looking up. Dad, you have millions. Why don't you lend her the money? Liquidity, Howard said quickly. Too quickly. My cash is tied up in the expansion project. You know that. And my credit utilization is high because of the new warehouse bonds. You, on the other hand, have a pristine record, low debt-to-income ratio. Your signature makes this happen instantly. It will prove you love me, Marianne said softly. She widened her eyes, giving me that look she used when we were children and she wanted my dessert. It is just a signature. Stell, it is symbolic. It says, you believe in me. I looked at the document again. The interest rate was 12%. The lender wasn't a bank. It was an LLC I had never heard of. I need to see the terms, I said. I need to see the collateral agreement. I need to know what happens if she defaults. Howard's smile didn't waver, but his eyes went cold. Defaults? She isn't going to default. The settlement is coming. Then show me the settlement offer, I said. Show me the letter from Julian's lawyer stating that a payout is imminent. Stella, Howard warned. If it is a bridge loan, I pressed. Show me the other side of the bridge. I am not co-signing a $50,000 debt on blind faith, especially not after I saw my credit report showing unauthorized inquiries last week. The air at the table rushed out as if a window had been blown open at 30,000 feet. Marianne snatched her hand back from mine. Howard slammed his coffee cup down. Coffee sloshed onto the saucer. Family does not ask for paperwork, he hissed. The volume was loud enough that the couple at the next table glanced over. You are insulting your sister. You are insulting me. I vouch for her. Is that not enough for you? No, I said. It is not. You are ungrateful, Howard spat. I gave you everything, and you won't do this one small thing. You would let your sister drown over a technicality? A $50,000 liability is not a technicality, I said. I pushed the paper back across the table. I won't sign it. Howard stared at me. He looked like he wanted to reach across the table and strangle me. But we were in public. He took a deep breath, adjusting his tie. Fine, he said tightly. Do it the hard way. But remember, Stella, nobody wins alone. I left the brunch with a migraine and a realization. I was bringing a knife to a gunfight. They weren't just messy people. They were legally dangerous. I didn't go home. I drove to a nondescript office park in Westerville. I had made the appointment on Friday, using the burner phone. The sign on the door said, Reynolds and Finch, landlord-tenant law. I sat across from a woman named Sarah Reynolds. She was 60, wore a gray suit, and had eyes that looked like they had seen every possible variation of human greed. I told her everything, the move-in, the refusal to leave, the occupancy affidavit Marianne had tried to make me sign, the money. Sarah listened without interrupting. When I finished, she took off her glasses and cleaned them slowly. You are making a classic mistake, Ms. Davis, she said. Her voice was dry and professional. You are treating this like a family problem. It is not. It is a property dispute. You have a squatter who happens to share your DNA. She is my sister, I said weakly. She is an unwanted tenant, Sarah corrected. And in the state of Ohio, if she stays there much longer, establishes residency, receives mail, and you don't have a written agreement. She gains rights, constructive tenancy. If you want her out, you need to stop asking and start commanding. Your boundaries need teeth, not speeches. She drafted a document for me right there. It wasn't a text message. It wasn't a polite request. It was a notice to vacate and cease desist. Serve this to her today, Sarah instructed. Hand it to her, then email a copy to her and to yourself, so you have a digital timestamp. It gives her 7 days to vacate. It explicitly prohibits guests, commercial activity, and noise violations. If she violates it, we move to eviction proceedings immediately. I paid her retainer in cash, money I had withdrawn from my new bank account. I drove home. My hands were steady. When I walked in, the house was quiet. Marianne was on the couch, watching TV. She didn't look up. I am not signing the loan, I said. I know, she muttered. Dad told me. You are a bitch. I walked over and held out the document Sarah had drafted. This is for you, I said. Marianne took it, frowning. She read the header. Her eyes widened. What is this? She laughed, crumbling the paper slightly. A legal notice? Are you suing me? It is a notice to vacate, I said. You have until next Sunday at noon. Also, read paragraph 3. No guests, no filming, no access to my office. If you violate these terms, I will file for an immediate eviction order. Marianne stared at me. She stood up, crumpled the paper into a ball, and threw it at my face. I am not going anywhere, she screamed. Dad says I can stay. Dad doesn't own this house, I said calmly. I do. I turned and walked into the kitchen. I didn't engage. I didn't argue. I had given notice. The clock was ticking. Marianne's reaction was predictable. She didn't pack. She rebelled. That night, at 8 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Then it rang again. I was in my bedroom with the door locked. I heard voices, loud, laughing voices. I checked the security camera feed on my phone. Marianne had invited 4 women over. They were carrying bags of wine and takeout containers. Healing night, Marianne shrieked as she opened the door. Come in, girls. Ignore the bad vibes. My sister is being a total warden, but we are going to manifest joy anyway. The bass started 10 minutes later. It was a direct challenge. She was daring me to come downstairs in my bathrobe and scream at her in front of her friends. She wanted the scene. She wanted to be able to tell Dad. See? Stella is crazy. She embarrassed me. I didn't go downstairs. I put on my noise-canceling headphones. I took out my phone. I opened a decibel meter app. I recorded the noise level. 85 decibels. I took a screenshot. I walked into the hallway, recording a video on my phone. I captured the sound, the timestamp, and the fact that there were strangers in my home in direct violation of the notice I had served 4 hours ago. Then, I did something I never thought I would do. I forwarded the evidence to my own email. Then, I forwarded it to the HOA board email address. Subject: Self-report of noise violation at 124 Oak Creek Drive. Body: Please be advised that a noise violation is currently occurring at my property due to an unauthorized gathering hosted by a guest. I accept the fine. Please issue the violation notice immediately so I can add it to the legal file for eviction proceedings. I was reporting myself. I was inviting the fine because an HOA violation issued to the homeowner citing unauthorized tenant behavior was admissible in court. It was proof that her presence was damaging my standing in the community. I went back to bed. I could hear them laughing downstairs, breaking glasses, mocking me. She is probably crying in her pillow, I heard one of them say. I wasn't crying. I was waiting. Monday morning. The retaliation arrived. I was at my desk at work, my actual work, ignoring the stares from the fallout of Friday's scene, when my internal extension rang. Stella, Howard's voice said. It was smooth, deadly calm. I heard you had a little party last night. Marianne had a party, I corrected, in violation of the written notice I served her. That piece of paper? Howard chuckled. That was cute. But let's talk about something real. I am looking at the org chart for next quarter. Stella. My stomach tightened. And? And I am thinking the vice president of operations role requires a certain temperament, he said. A certain loyalty. I am thinking of restructuring. Maybe moving you to the warehouse management role in Dayton. It is a 60% pay cut, of course, and you would lose your title. But it seems like you are having trouble managing stress. A smaller role might be good for you. Dayton was 2 hours away. Warehouse management was an entry-level job. It was a demotion so severe it was a constructive dismissal. He was threatening to nuke my career if I didn't fold. You would demote me because I won't let Marianne wreck my house? I asked. I would demote you because you are not a team player, he said. Think about it. Stella, you have until the end of the week to fix this. Sign the loan, let her stay, or pack your desk. He hung up. I sat there, holding the receiver. The dial tone buzzed in my ear. A week ago, this would have broken me. I would have cried. I would have driven to his house and begged. I would have signed the loan just to keep the peace, just to keep the title I had worked 10 years for. But as I looked at the gray fabric of my cubicle wall, something inside me shifted. It was a physical sensation, like a gear clicking into place after spinning uselessly for years. I realized I had been fighting to be understood. I wanted them to see me. I wanted them to acknowledge that I was right, that I was good, that I was valuable. But you cannot make people see what they refuse to look at. They didn't want a daughter or a sister. They wanted a servant. And when the servant stopped serving, they punished her. I slowly put the phone down. I stopped trying to figure out how to explain myself to them. I stopped trying to find the magic words that would make Howard Davis respect me. I opened the exit plan email draft. I typed a new line. Phase 1 complete. Legal groundwork laid. Phase 2. Liquidation. I wasn't going to fight for my job. I wasn't going to fight for their approval. I was going to burn the bridge while I was still standing on it. And I was going to make sure I was the only one wearing a fireproof suit. I picked up the burner phone and texted Kay. I am ready to list. Cash buyers only. Fast close. I didn't feel sad anymore. I felt dangerous. The opportunity arrived on Tuesday morning, wrapped in the scent of coconut sunscreen and unearned arrogance. Marianne came down the stairs dragging 2 enormous suitcases. She was wearing a wide-brimmed hat and oversized sunglasses, looking like she was about to board a yacht in the Mediterranean rather than a terrified woman facing eviction. I am going to Scottsdale, she announced, dropping her keys on the counter. The girls and I need a reset. All this negative energy you're projecting is clogging my chakras. I'm going to a wellness retreat for a week. Do not wait up. I looked up from my coffee. You are going on a vacation? It is not a vacation. Stella, it is a retreat. There is a difference. And don't worry about the cost. Julian will pay for it eventually. I put it on the emergency card Dad gave me. She checked her reflection in the microwave door. Oh, and while I am gone, do not touch my stuff. I have my crystals set up in a specific grid in the living room. If you move them, you disrupt the energy flow. I won't touch a thing, I said. I watched her Uber Black pull away from the curb. The moment the taillights disappeared around the corner, the heavy, suffocating atmosphere in the house lifted. I didn't exhale. I didn't relax. I looked at the calendar on the wall. Marianne would be gone for 7 days. 7 days was not a vacation. 7 days was a window. I walked into my office and locked the door. I pulled the burner phone from its hiding spot. I dialed Kay. Kendra Holt answered on the second ring. Talk to me. I am ready to sell, I said. 124 Oak Creek Drive. I need it done fast. Kendra, I don't want a sign in the yard. I don't want open houses. I don't want my neighbors to know until the moving truck is gone. And I need a closing date within 5 days. Kendra didn't gasp. She didn't ask why. She was a shark, and sharks don't ask the water why it is salty. They just swim. I have a pocket listing network, she said, her voice the sound of rapid-fire typing. Investors, cash buyers, they don't care about the paint color. They care about the cap rate. What is your bottom line? Pay off the mortgage and get me out with my equity. I said. I want a remote closing. I want the money wire transferred to a new account, and I want possession to transfer immediately upon funding. I can get you an offer by tomorrow noon, Kendra said, but if you want speed over price, you are going to take a haircut on the market value, maybe 5%. I don't care about 5%, I said. I care about 100% freedom. Do it. Done. Start packing. I hung up. Phase 1 was active. Next, I opened my laptop. I had a Zoom interview scheduled for 11 o'clock. I had been headhunted by Juniper Ridge Strategy Group 6 months ago. At the time, I had ignored their emails. I was loyal to the family business. I was the dutiful daughter waiting for her turn at the helm. I wasn't waiting anymore. I logged into the call. The hiring manager, a woman named Elena, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, smiled. "We were surprised to hear from you. Stella," she said. "We thought you were a lifer at Hawthorne and Rowe." "I have reached the ceiling of my growth there," I said, my voice steady. "I am looking for an organization that values operational efficiency over legacy traditions." The interview lasted 45 minutes. It wasn't an interrogation. It was a courtship. They knew my numbers. They knew I had saved my father's company 15% in overhead year over year. They wanted that efficiency. "We can offer you the Senior Director of Logistics role," Elena said, "based in Austin. Relocation package included. Base salary is $220,000, plus stock options." I did the math in my head. It was more than double what my father paid me. It was validation with a dollar sign attached. "I accept," I said. "But I have a condition. I need a start date in 2 weeks, and I need the offer letter signed today." "I will have it in your inbox in an hour," she said. I closed the laptop. I sat in the silence of my home office. I had just sold my house and doubled my income in the span of 2 hours. Now came the logistics. I treated my departure like a covert operation. I didn't buy cardboard boxes from Home Depot. That would leave a paper trail. And neighbors might see me carrying them in. Instead, I hired a white-glove moving service that specialized in high-net-worth divorces and corporate relocations. I called them the Midnight Movers. "I need a pack and ship," I told the dispatcher. "Small load, only essentials, documents, sentimental items, clothes, everything else stays, and I need it done at night." "We can have a crew there Thursday at 9 in the evening," the dispatcher said. Wednesday passed in a blur of digital hygiene. I went into the Hawthorne and Rowe office for the last time. I didn't look like a woman who was quitting. I wore my usual navy blazer. I brought coffee for the assistant, but while everyone else was in the weekly sales meeting, a meeting I usually led, but had been pointedly excluded from by Howard, I was at my desk, performing a digital autopsy. I inserted a terabyte hard drive into my computer. I transferred my personal portfolio, the spreadsheets I had built from scratch, the vendor contact lists that were my intellectual property, developed on my own time, the process manuals I had written. Then, I started the deletion. I didn't just drag files to the recycling bin. I used a secure file shredding program that overwrote the data with zeros, then ones, then zeros again. I wiped my browser history. I logged out of every company account. Email, Slack, the ERP system. I deleted the saved passwords. I cleaned out my physical desk. I took the photo of my mother. I took my favorite pen. I took the stress ball I had squeezed during 1,000 angry phone calls with Dad. I left the files that belonged to the company, the invoices, the active contracts. I wasn't a saboteur. I was a professional. But without my systems, without the cheat sheets and the custom macros I had built to make the archaic software actually work, those files were just digital paperweights. Howard would sit down at this computer on Monday and realize that while the car was still there, the engine was gone, at 5 o'clock. I stood up. I looked around the office. I looked at the glass conference room where my father had humiliated me. I looked at the corner office he sat in, ruling his kingdom of fear. I felt nothing, no sadness, no nostalgia. Just the cool, detached satisfaction of closing a ledger that had been in the red for too long. "Good night, Stella," Sarah, the receptionist said as I walked past. Goodbye, Sarah, I said. She didn't hear the difference. Thursday night, 9 o'clock. The midnight movers arrived in an unmarked black van. They backed into my driveway. Lights off. 3 men in black uniforms stepped out. They moved with the silent efficiency of a SWAT team. Show us what goes, the foreman said. I led them through the house. The contents of the home office safe, I said. These 3 plastic bins in the closet, the clothes in the master closet, the jewelry box. What about the furniture? He asked, gesturing to my mid-century armchair. Leave it, I said. It is part of the sale. Sold as is. They worked fast. In 2 hours, my life was packed into 20 crates. And this stuff? The foreman asked. Pointing to the living room, Marianne's chaos was still there. The tripod lights, the garment racks, the piles of shoes, the crystals arranged in a grid on the floor. Do not touch any of that, I said. Leave it exactly where it is. Copy that. They loaded the van. I signed the manifest. We will store this in our climate-controlled facility until you give us the Austin address, the foreman said. Safe travels, ma'am. They drove away. I was alone in the house. It was strange. My bedroom was empty, stripped bare. My office was clear. But the rest of the house looked lived in. Marianne's presence was so overwhelming that even with my things gone, the house still felt full of her, and that was fine, because it wasn't my house anymore. Friday morning, Kendra called at 10 o'clock. We have a buyer, she said. Cash offer, $410,000. They are an investment group looking to turn it into a rental. They want a 10-day close, but I talked them down to 3 if we include the furniture. Take it, I said. I sent the DocuSign to your secure email, she said. Sign it, and we close Monday morning. Funds wire by Monday afternoon. I opened the email on my phone. I scrolled through the contract. Seller, Stella Davis. Buyer, OH. Property Holdings, LLC. Possession. Date, Tuesday, October 24th. I signed with my finger on the screen. It was done. I spent the weekend in a hotel near the airport. I didn't want to be in the house. I didn't want to risk running into a neighbor or having Dad stop by. I left the house unlocked. I left the keys on the kitchen counter, next to a note I had written for the new owners. To the new owners, the keys are here. The garage code is 8421. The house is sold as is. Please be advised there is a squatter's belongings in the common areas. I have provided legal notice for her to vacate, but she is currently absent. Good luck. It was cold. It was brutal, but it was necessary. On Monday morning, I sat in the hotel lobby. I refreshed my banking app on the new phone. At 2:15 in the afternoon, the notification appeared. Wire transfer received. $402,500. The mortgage was paid off. The closing costs were deducted. The rest was mine. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders that I hadn't realized I was carrying. It was the weight of obligation, the weight of being the good one. I checked my flight app. My flight to Austin left at 6 o'clock. I had one last thing to do. I drove back to the house one last time. I didn't go in. I parked down the street, in the shadow of a large oak tree. The house looked the same. The grass was cut. The windows were gleaming. Inside, Marianne's healing sanctuary was waiting for her. Her crystals were charging. Her ring light was standing guard. She was coming back tomorrow. She thought she was coming back to a battle. She thought she was coming back to argue about loan papers and grocery bills. She thought she was coming back to wear me down until I broke. She didn't know that the battlefield had been sold. She didn't know that when she punched her code into the door tomorrow, it wouldn't work because the new owners would have already changed the locks. She didn't know that she wasn't my problem anymore. She was a trespassing issue for OH Property Holdings, LLC. I looked at the house that I had loved, the home I had bought with my own money, the sanctuary I had tried so hard to defend. I realized I wasn't running away. Running away implies fear. It implies a lack of control. This was a strategic withdrawal. I was removing the platform they stood on. I put the car in drive. "Goodbye, Stella Davis," I whispered. I drove to the airport, walked through security, and boarded a plane to a city where nobody knew my last name, and nobody expected me to fix their life. I turned off my phone. The exit was complete. The resignation email was not a manifesto. It was not a declaration of war. It was a standard template I found online, stripped of all emotion and filled with bureaucratic finality. I hit send at exactly 8 o'clock on Monday morning, sitting in the departure lounge of John Glenn Columbus International Airport. To Howard Davis, CEO, Hawthorne and Rowe Interiors. From Stella Davis, Vice President of Operations. Subject: Resignation. Dear Mr. Davis, please accept this letter as formal notification that I am resigning from my position as Vice President of Operations, effective immediately. I have cleared my desk and returned all company property, including keys and access badges, to the security desk in the lobby. My final logistics reports have been uploaded to the shared server. I wish the company the best. Sincerely, Stella Davis. I closed my laptop. I removed the SIM card from my old phone and snapped it in half, dropping the pieces into a trash can next to a half-eaten bagel. There was no drama. There was no screaming match in the lobby. I simply vanished from the corporate roster of Hawthorne and Rowe, just as the wire transfer for $402,000 hit my new bank account. I boarded the plane to Austin as a free woman. By the time I landed in Texas, rented a car, and checked into my corporate housing, a sleek, glass-walled apartment overlooking the Colorado River. The bomb I had left behind in Ohio was just about to detonate. It started on Tuesday morning. Marianne returned from Scottsdale at 11 o'clock. I can picture it clearly, because I knew her schedule better than she knew it herself. She would have taken the early flight to avoid the rush. She would have treated herself to a mimosa on the plane. She would have arrived at my house. The house, feeling tan, triumphant, and spiritually cleansed. She dragged her Louis Vuitton suitcase up the driveway, her heels clicking on the concrete. She was likely rehearsing her opening line to me. She probably planned to walk in, toss her hat on the table, and announce that she had forgiven me for my toxicity, provided I had signed the loan papers. She walked up to the front door. She reached out with a manicured finger and punched her code into the keypad lock. 1988. The lock usually gave a cheerful chirp and the sound of a deadbolt sliding back. This time, it gave a harsh, rapid beep. A red light flashed. Access denied. Marianne likely frowned, adjusted her sunglasses, and tried again. She probably thought she had mistyped it. 1988. Beep, beep, beep. The deadbolt did not move. The confusion would have lasted only a few seconds before it curdled into annoyance. She checked her phone. She texted me. "Stella, the door is jammed. Open up. I am freezing out here." I didn't answer. My old phone was in a landfill. My new phone was on the kitchen island in Austin. Silent. Marianne knocked. Then she pounded. "Stella," she shouted. "This isn't funny. I have to pee. Open the damn door." She tried the handle. Locked. She walked around to the garage keypad. She punched in the code. Nothing. The panic started to set in now. Not the fear of danger, but the fear of inconvenience, which for Marianne was far worse. She called Dad. "She changed the codes," Marianne screamed into her phone, standing on the porch of a house she thought she owned by proxy. "She locked me out. Dad, she is being so petty." "I am on my way," Howard said shortly. "Do not move. I will handle her." Marianne turned back to the door, ready to kick it. She raised her fist to pound on the wood again, but before she could strike, the door opened. Marianne stepped back, a smug smile already forming on her lips, ready to launch into a tirade about disrespect and sisterhood. "Finally," she began, "I have been standing here for 20 minutes and—" The words died in her throat. It wasn't me standing in the doorway. It was a man in his late 40s. He was wearing a gray polo shirt with a logo embroidered on the chest. Pinnacle Property Management. He held a clipboard. He looked at Marianne with the weary patience of a man who had been briefed on a difficult situation. "Can I help you?" he asked. Marianne blinked. She looked past him, into the hallway. The hallway was empty. My coat rack was gone. The runner rug was gone. The walls were bare. "Who are you?" she demanded. "Where is Stella? Tell her to stop hiding." "Stella doesn't live here," the man said calmly. "My name is Mr. Henderson. I am the property manager for the new owners." "The new owners?" Marianne laughed. It was a sharp, jagged sound. "What are you talking about? My sister owns this house. I live here. Now get out of my way." She tried to push past him. "Mr. Henderson didn't budge. He blocked the doorway with his shoulder. "Ma'am, you do not live here," he said, his voice dropping an octave. "This property was sold and closed yesterday. The deed has been transferred to OH Property Holdings, LLC. The previous owner, Ms. Davis, vacated the premises 48 hours ago." "Sold?" Marianne whispered. The color drained from her face beneath her spray tan. "That is impossible. She can't sell it. She needs my permission." "She was the sole owner on the title," Mr. Henderson said. "She didn't need anyone's permission." He stepped out onto the porch and pointed toward the driveway. "As for your belongings," he said, consulting his clipboard, "we found a significant amount of personal property left in the common areas. Per the terms of the sale, the property was sold as is, meaning any items left behind were considered abandoned." Marianne followed his finger. At the end of the driveway, right by the curb where the trash truck stopped, was a pile. It wasn't a neat stack. It was a mountain of black heavy-duty contractor bags. Sticking out of one bag was the tripod of her ring light. Another bag had split open, revealing a tangle of her expensive silk scarves. Her healing crystals were dumped unceremoniously into a clear plastic bin that was sitting on top of a bag of shoes. "However," Mr. Henderson continued, "the new owners were gracious enough to bag them for you instead of sending them to the dump immediately. You have until 5 o'clock today to remove them from the property line, or the city will be called for bulk trash pickup." Marianne stared at the pile. Her studio, her wardrobe, her identity. It looked like garbage. "No!" she screamed. It was a primal sound. She ran down the driveway, tripping over her own suitcase. She tore open one of the bags. Her designer sweaters were jammed in with her makeup palettes. "No, you can't do this. This is illegal. I have rights." "You were served a notice to vacate 7 days ago," Mr. Henderson called out from the porch. "You ignored it. You have no rights to this property." A black Mercedes squealed around the corner. It jumped the curb, tearing up a patch of grass, and screeched to a halt behind Marianne's Uber. Howard Davis got out. He looked like a man possessed. His face was a mask of red fury. He had received the resignation email. He had tried to call me 50 times, and now he was seeing his daughter, the one he actually cared about, kneeling on the pavement amidst trash bags. "What is going on here?" he roared. He marched up the driveway, ignoring Marianne, heading straight for Mr. Henderson. "Who are you? Open this door. I want to see Stella." "Stella is not here," Mr. Henderson repeated. "I am the property manager." "I don't care who you are," Howard yelled, stabbing a finger at the man's chest. "You are trespassing. This is my daughter's house. I am calling the police." "Please do," Mr. Henderson said. He reached into his back pocket and pulled out a folded document. "While you are doing that, you might want to look at this." He handed Howard a photocopy. Howard snatched it. His hands were shaking so hard the paper rattled. I can imagine his eyes scanning the lines. He would recognize the form. He was a businessman. He knew what a HUD-1 settlement statement looked like. Date of closing: Monday, October 23rd. Seller: Stella Davis. Buyer: OH Property Holdings, LLC. Status: funded and recorded. He flipped to the signature page. There was my digital signature, authenticated and time-stamped. "This is a fraud," Howard sputtered, but his voice lacked conviction. He looked at the notary stamp. He looked at the recording number from the county clerk. It is entirely legal, Mr. Henderson said. The funds have been dispersed. The title has cleared. The locks have been changed. Ms. Davis is no longer the owner of record, and neither of you has permission to be on this land. Howard looked at the house. He looked at the windows where he used to see me working late at night, making sure his company stayed profitable. He looked at the closed door. For the first time in his life, Howard Davis was looking at a wall he could not shout down. He was looking at a contract he could not bully into submission. "Where is she?" Howard whispered. "I don't know." Mr. Henderson lied. "But she left a note for the new owners." "What did it say?" Howard demanded. "It said the house was sold as is," Mr. Henderson said, "and that she took everything that mattered." Howard turned around. He looked at Marianne. Marianne was sitting on the asphalt, clutching a bag of shoes, weeping. She wasn't weeping for me. She wasn't weeping for the relationship. She was weeping because she realized there was no guest room. There was no ensuite bath. There was no free ride. "Dad," she wailed. "Fix it. Make him let me in." Howard looked at her. Then he looked at the pile of trash bags. He realized then that the leash he had bragged about, the housing, had been cut, and the collar, the job, had been slipped. He had threatened to fire me. He had threatened to make me unhireable. He had threatened to take my home. I had simply removed the home and the job from the equation. "Get in the car," Howard said to Marianne. His voice was dull, defeated. "But my stuff," Marianne cried. "We can't fit it all in the Mercedes." "I said get in the car," Howard roared. It was a sound of impotent rage, the sound of a king realizing his castle was made of sand. They spent the next hour frantically loading black trash bags into the pristine leather interior of his luxury sedan. Marianne had to sit in the passenger seat with a bag of pillows on her lap. They had to leave the garment rack on the curb. Mr. Henderson watched them from the porch until they drove away. In Austin, I was sitting on my balcony, watching the sun set over the river. The sky was a bruised purple and gold. My burner phone, which I had kept on just in case, buzzed. "Missed call, Howard Davis, 14. Missed call, Marianne Davis, 22. Voicemail from Howard Davis. Stella, pick up the phone. You cannot do this. We need to talk. Where are you?" Text from Marianne. "I hate you. You ruined my retreat. You are dead to me." I didn't listen to the voicemail. I didn't reply to the text. I took a sip of iced tea. The condensation was cold against my fingers. I wasn't hiding. I wasn't running. I was waiting, because the story wasn't over. They thought this was the end. They thought I had just escaped. But I hadn't just escaped. I had set a trap. The final dinner was coming, the one where I would explain exactly why I did what I did. But this time, I wouldn't be the one serving the food. I would be the one serving the verdict. I picked up my new corporate phone and dialed the number for the finest restaurant in Columbus, a place Howard had never been able to get a reservation on short notice. "Good evening," the concierge answered. "The refectory." "Hi," I said. "I would like to make a reservation for 3 people for next Saturday night. A private room, please. And the name?" "Stella Davis," I said. "And please send the invitation to Howard Davis at Hawthorne and Row. Tell him it is a settlement meeting." I hung up. They wanted a family meeting? I would give them one. But this time, I was bringing the receipts, all of them. The setting was different, but the war was the same. We were seated in the private dining room of the refectory, a space of dark wood and hushed acoustics that smelled of old money and beeswax. I had chosen this location deliberately. It was neutral ground. It was public enough to prevent violence, but private enough to allow for the truth. I sat at the head of the table. Howard Davis sat to my right. Marianne sat to my left. It was the exact same configuration as that night in my dining room 3 weeks ago. But the gravity in the room had shifted. The earth had tilted on its axis, and they were the ones struggling to keep their footing. Dad was not eating. He was staring at me with a mixture of confusion and a fury that he was struggling to contain. He looked older than he had a week ago. The lines around his mouth were deeper. His suit, usually immaculate, looked slightly rumpled, as if he had dressed in the dark. Marianne looked less like a conqueror and more like a refugee. She was wearing a dress that was too formal for a Tuesday, likely one of the few clean things she had salvaged from the trash bags on the curb. She wouldn't meet my eyes. She just picked at the linen tablecloth, her nervous energy radiating off her like heat. "You have to take care of her," Dad said. He repeated the order. It was the same sentence he had barked at me in my own home, the same command he had issued for 30 years, but this time, the words sounded hollow. They lacked the weight of authority. They sounded like a prayer from a man who had forgotten how to pray. "No," I said. "I don't." Howard slammed his hand on the table. The silverware jumped. "Do not play games with me. Stella, you have humiliated this family. You evicted your sister like a criminal. You resigned without notice. You have caused chaos at the office. We have shipments sitting on the dock because no one knows the override codes for the new inventory system." "That sounds like an operational problem," I said calmly, taking a sip of water. "I believe you have a warehouse manager to handle that." "I am going to ruin you," he hissed. He leaned in, his eyes narrowing. "You think you can just walk away? I will make sure you never work in this industry again. I will sue you for breach of fiduciary duty. I will tie you up in court for 10 years. I will bleed you dry until you are begging to come back." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had terrified me for 3 decades, and I felt absolutely nothing. No fear, no guilt, no desire to please. "You can't ruin me, Dad," I said, "because you don't know who I am anymore. You think I am your employee. You think I am your daughter. But for the last 3 weeks, I have just been a target." I reached into my bag and pulled out a file folder. It was thick. I slid it across the polished wood table. It stopped right in front of his plate. "I know," I said. "Know what?" Marianne snapped. Looking up, her eyes were red-rimmed. "I know why you really moved in," I said, keeping my voice low and level. "I know it wasn't about grief. I know it wasn't about needing a sister. It was about the $1.2 million you owe your ex-husband's creditors." Marianne froze. Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. "I read the divorce filings. Marianne," I continued. "I know about the forensic accounting. I know about the hidden accounts. You didn't leave Julian because he cheated. He kicked you out because you were embezzling from him." I turned to my father. "And you?" I said. "You knew. You knew she was drowning in debt. You knew Harriman and Associates was coming for her. And you knew you didn't have the liquidity to bail her out because you over-leveraged the company on the expansion." Howard went pale. The red flush of anger vanished, replaced by the waxen pallor of exposure. "So you came up with a plan," I said. "You sent her to my house. You told me to take care of her. You pressured me to sign a loan. You tried to get me to sign an occupancy affidavit, and when I refused, you tried to hack my financial life." I opened the folder. I laid out the papers one by one. "Here is the credit report showing the unauthorized inquiries from the lender you play golf with," I said. "Here is the log of the attempts to access my bank accounts from an IP address registered to your home in Bexley. Here is the email chain between you and Marianne where you discussed bridging the gap with my equity." "We were going to pay you back," Marianne shouted. She stood up, her chair screeching against the floor. "It was just a loan. Dad said your house had $400,000 in equity sitting there doing nothing. He said we could use it to pay off the lawyers and then pay it back when the company stocks vested." "Marianne!" Dad roared. "Shut up." But it was too late. The truth was out, naked and shivering in the middle of the room. "He promised me," Marianne cried, turning on him. "You told me she would fold. You told me Stella always does what she is told. You said her house was basically ours anyway because you gave her the job." I looked at my father. He shrank back in his chair. The great patriarch, the captain of industry, reduced to a swindler trying to rob his own daughter to cover his mistakes. Family, Howard whispered. He tried to summon the old magic, the guilt trip that had worked 1,000 times before. He held out a hand, palm up. Stella, we are family. Family helps each other survive. We were in trouble. Yes, maybe we went about it the wrong way. But we did it to protect the name, to protect the legacy. Doesn't that mean anything to you? It means everything to me, I said. That is why I left. I stood up. You didn't want love, Dad, I said. You didn't want loyalty. You wanted access. You wanted access to my credit, access to my home, access to my labor. You thought I was an asset you could liquidate whenever you needed cash. You are being dramatic, Howard scoffed, trying to regain his footing. Sit down. We can work this out. I will give you a raise. We will forget the loan. It is too late, I said. I have already resigned. I have accepted a position as a senior director at a firm in Austin. My salary is double what you paid me. Howard's eyes widened. Austin? You can't move to Austin. I am already there, I said. And the house? The house you wanted to leverage? It is sold. The deed transferred on Monday. The equity is in my bank account, protected by a trust you cannot touch. Sold? Howard whispered. You sold the house? Cash buyer, I said. 3-day close. It is done. I looked at Marianne. She was sobbing now, her face buried in her hands. She wasn't crying for me. She was crying because she knew exactly what was about to happen. She had lost her host. You are on your own, I said. Both of you. I blocked your numbers. I blocked your emails. Do not come to Austin. If you do, I will file for a restraining order, and I will attach this file of evidence to the petition. I pulled a $100 bill from my purse and placed it on the table. Dinner is on me, I said. Consider it my final contribution to the family fund. I walked out of the private room. I walked through the main dining room. I walked out into the cool night air of Columbus. I didn't look back. The collapse happened faster than even I had predicted. I watched it from a distance, through the safe, sterile lens of industry news and LinkedIn updates, without me there to manage the logistics. The supply chain at Hawthorne and Rowe began to fracture within 2 weeks. I had built that system. I was the only one who understood the complex web of vendor relationships and shipping algorithms. When I left, I took the institutional knowledge with me. Orders were missed, deadlines were blown, key clients, tired of the delays, canceled their contracts. The stock price dipped, then plummeted. Howard tried to fix it, but he was distracted. He was distracted because he had a new roommate. Marianne moved into his house in Bexley. With no settlement coming from her ex-husband, because the fraud was proven, and no soft landing at my house, she turned her hunger on the only target left. She drained him. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she took over the master wing. She ordered renovations. She threw parties. She ran up his credit cards, just as she had tried to run up mine. But Howard couldn't stop her. He was trapped by his own logic. He had spent his life preaching that family takes care of family, and now he was choking on his own gospel. 6 months later, the news broke that Hawthorne and Rowe was downsizing. They sold the headquarters building. They liquidated the fleet. Howard Davis was forced to sell his estate in Bexley to cover the business debts and Marianne's spending. They moved into a rented condo. 2 bitter people trapped in a shrinking box, blaming each other for the kingdom they had lost. I was in my kitchen in Austin when the voicemail came through. It was a Tuesday evening. I had just finished a run along the river. My apartment was quiet, peaceful. The only sound was the hum of the air conditioning and the distant music from a festival downtown. I saw the notification, block number. I knew who it was. I pressed play. Stella. My father's voice rasped. He sounded old, broken. There was a slur in his words, the sound of too much scotch. Stella, please, you have to come home. It is a mess. Marianne she is out of control. The business is sinking. I don't know how to fix the shipping routes. I don't know the passwords. Just call me. I will give you anything. I will give you the company. Just come back and fix it. Please, I am your father. I listened to the message. I listened to the sound of a man who had finally learned the difference between blood and leverage, only to realize he had run out of both. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel anger. I felt the way you feel when you finish a book you didn't really like, and you close the cover, and you put it back on the shelf. I pressed delete. I walked to my balcony door and locked it, not because I was afraid, but because it was night. And that is what you do when you are safe. I turned off the lights. I was home. And for the first time in my life, the house I was standing in belonged entirely to me. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to hear where you are tuning in from. So please leave a comment down below with your location and share your thoughts on Stella's Revenge. If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to the Monica Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and smash that hype button so this story can be heard by even more people.